Welcome to a Wednesday morning live edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Nick Whalen joined, as always, on Wednesdays by my guy, Brandon Kravitz. Brandon, we will talk about your Orlando Magic later in the pod. We haven't done a deep dive on the Magic in a while, and they deserve it, man. Still a top three team in the Eastern Conference, tied with Milwaukee right now at 16-7. We will discuss some of the fallout from last night's pretty small Tuesday night slate, only 5 games, so not a whole lot to say. But, we got some Draymond Green news. We had the return of Bradley Beal. We'll play a little head-to-head. Who would you rather roster the rest of the way? And then, of course, later in the show, as we always do, we will take and answer as many live listener questions as we can. So put those in the chat. We're not ignoring them. We will get to all of them later in the podcast. How are you doing, Brandon? It's been a week since we've chatted. Fun NFL weekend, really fun football weekend coming up as well. But looking forward to chatting some hoops with you.
Yeah, for sure. I have like one foot still in the madness of this sports schedule, and then the other foot is in the holidays. I've already had multiple get-togethers. I actually had
already.
Yes.
Huh. So are you someone whose family does these like pre-Christmas gatherings?
So I grew up in a Jewish family, so Hanukkah is already up and running. We're on to night 7 tonight, so that get together has already happened.
So are we in like the group play stage of Hanukkah?
Yes, we're wrapping it up. Like we're about to hit the final 4. Things are getting pretty serious. My kid already has way too many presents. Good problem to have.
Yep.
And then my wife's parents split when she was young, so she's got 2 sets of families that we're all between 2 different holidays, 3 different sets of parents that we have to accommodate for. December is pretty well taken care of every year. So yeah, I've been all over the place, and I actually had a radio commitment this past Sunday, so I couldn't go to one of the get-togethers. I had a Sunday with Red Zone by myself, no wife, no child. I didn't even know what to do with myself. I just started working on plumbing issues. Like I'm not even a mechanic, just so that I could feel better about the situation. But yeah, I mean, all is good.
Well, I don't have a child. I do have a wife, but no child. So that is basically my Sunday every week is, plop down. We got the 2 TVs going. We got the iPad going, on some sort of random streaming website to try to find the Jaguars game. I'm fighting through pop-up ads every 5 seconds.
Yeah.
But man, I love nothing more than a chill NFL Sunday. And we got 4 of those coming up, with no more teams on by. But anyway, let's talk some hoops here. Suns beat the Warriors last night, 119-116. Golden State's got major issues, man. Watching this team, you almost feel bad for Stephen Curry. I mean, he is now really I guess, they've had a couple down years, over the last few since Durant left. There was the one year where Curry got hurt and everything kind of bottomed out. But you almost felt like, with Curry missing so much time, that was kind of a wash. And obviously, got them the number 2 overall pick, which did not necessarily turn into a foundational piece. But I mean, really for the first time, I feel like Curry is going through what like LeBron has gone through a few times. So you think of that final year in Cleveland, some of those early years in LA where you're watching and thinking, man, I mean, this guy's still got it in his mid-30s. And, the players around him are kind of crumbling. We're still waiting for Andrew Wiggins, who went 1 of 7 in 15 minutes last night to come around. Kevon Looney, his minutes have been all over the place. Klay Thompson, 2 of 10 last night. Steve Kerr kept Wiggins, kept Thompson, kept Looney on the bench last night when Golden State clawed its way back into the game. And, really it was Saric, Kuminga, Brandon Pajemski, who had a huge game. We'll talk about him in a bit. Those were the guys that kind of rallied Golden State and kept them in this game late. But, man, the Warriors got big problems. They're 10-13. They need to find a way to add some more reliable depth or swing some sort of trade. I am of the belief that, first of all, if you try to trade Andrew Wiggins right now, I mean, his value is at the basement. I don't know what you could even get for him. I don't think they want to trade Klay. I think that would be a really, really tough decision. And I also don't really know what you could get for Klay at this point as well. For a guy who's seeking a big contract and would want that with another team. I think PR-wise, that would be a disaster. And then, of course, Brandon, on top of all this, Draymond Green takes a huge swing. And I don't know if he meant to hit Yusuf Nurkic. If he didn't, I don't know what he was doing with that arm. What are we looking at for a suspension here? I mean, we're, 2 weeks removed from him coming back from his previous suspension for the Gobert WWE takedown. I mean, this is just as bad as that. And I think, with everything compounding.
And again, he deflects in the post-game press conferences, like, well, I didn't mean to swing my entire arm around and whack this guy in the head like a spinning Ric Flair chop. Like, what is he talking about?
Well, it was so weird too, because he was acting as if they were tangled up. And like, if you watch the play, it's like, Nurkic is there, but it's not like he was like grabbing his arm or they were like, elbowing each other, going for a rebound. It's like, this is a sideline play. And I thought Nurkic was just he was playing normal defense. He was right there. Like, I don't think Nurkic was doing anything. Maybe there were some previous plays where, something had been building between those.
Oh, there's always something building, especially
there is,
with
but
Draymond.
Normally in those situations, you can at least see like, all right, I can see why this escalated. Like, that to me just kind of came out of nowhere. I think Nurkic was as shocked as anybody. I mean, I think we're looking at 10+ games for Draymond. I think this is a message sender by the NBA, especially given what happened with Gobert. I mean, what is your expectation for what the suspension will ultimately be? I'm hoping we find out today.
Yeah, I do think Nurkic fouled him before Draymond. He kind of grabbed his hip and turned him. So you could have called a foul on that. I mean, that's not a reason to turn around and smack someone in the head, but I guess we're getting technical here. But his last suspension was what, 5 games? Was
5 games.
What it was?
That to me felt a little light. Honestly, I was pretty surprised it was 5. And
this is his 19th ejection in his NBA career. I think they'll save the big one for 20. I think this is more like 7 at the yeah, exactly. You build up. It's like getting reward. It's like getting rewards points. Like you buy 9 smoothies, you get the 10th one free. That feels like they're gonna wait.
They should unfurl a banner at the Chase Center for the 20th ejection for Draymond. Like the eventual statue. Like I think there's going to be a Curry, Clay, Draymond maybe combo statue outside. Like it should be Curry hitting the shimmy, Clay hitting the 3, and then Draymond
hitting
somebody on the bottom.
I think the Sabonis stomp would be the statue.
I kind of forgot about that one, right? I mean, people were doing the Draymond retrospective last night on Twitter. I was like, oh yeah, that was actually a pretty major one. And that one gets lost to history because it was like somehow the least violent of all of his recent offenses. And
he denied that one too. I don't know if you go with punching Jordan Poole in practice.
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, if you could build an exact replica statue of like the TMZ footage, I would be on board with that.
I think 7 games feels about right for this.
We'll see, man. I think I would not be surprised if this is double digits, with everything, even on the last suspension, Adam Silver said, we had to take his past history into account. I is 7 enough? I mean, this feels like a equally violent, if not more violent act than what he did to Gobert, which is saying a lot. But yeah, even if it's 7 games, I mean, that's a big deal for the Warriors. Like fantasy wise, Draymond, he ranks barely inside the top 100. The minutes have been kind of spotty. Obviously, his defensive production is down. He's not even giving you a block or a steal per game. But you're missing the rebounds, you're missing the assists. I mean, I think it's almost a bigger deal for the Warriors in real life, though. I mean, they're sitting at 10-13 right now, and really have not been able to string anything together. Like they have not won consecutive games in well over a month. You have to go back to the first 2 days of November when they've won back-to-back games. You look at their schedule coming up: Clippers, Nets, Portland, Boston, Washington, Portland, Denver. Those would be their next 7. So if we're expecting a 7-game suspension, the interesting thing is the 7th game of that list is Christmas Day at Denver. Like, do you think that's a consideration at all? Like, does the NBA want him back for the big Christmas Day showcase?
I would think so. Having Draymond Green not on the floor doesn't help your product. No. I mean, I think we're at the point now, Golden State shouldn't even be a Christmas Day showcase anymore, but Steph Curry's that big of a star. Yeah, I'd be curious to see if they structure it that way. That would be the right amount of time. Did you already do the tally on how many games now between now and then? What kind of suspension they'd be looking at? I think that he would come back for that. The NBA loves marketing this stuff.
There
you go, 7 games. So they'll be the 7th. So a 6-game suspension seems awkward. Maybe they just give him another 5-gamer. I think he'll be back by Christmas.
Yeah, maybe it's a 10-gamer, but they allow him to play on Christmas, and then he's suspended again after that. He gets like a work release for Christmas Day. But yeah, I mean, it's just a bad situation for the Warriors, and Steve Kerr has kind of danced around this for the last couple of weeks. He's been pelted with questions, about what are you going to do with Wiggins, what do you do with Clay, and I don't think there's a real answer. You can even see the frustration with Kerr last night, where he's like, "Look, yeah, I left those guys on the bench because they weren't helping us. I mean, it was the bench that got us back into this game." And he's not wrong about that, right? I mean, it's Saric, Kuminga. I mean, Chris Paul played really well last night, 15 and 11 with 2 steals and 5 boards in 30 minutes. Moses Moody gave them some good minutes as well. But at the end of the day, I mean, this is a team that still wants to compete for a title, and it's all well and good to get those contributions, but that's not going to push you necessarily to the top of the West. Now, on the other side of this game, no Kevin Durant for Phoenix. We're now 23 games in for the Suns. We are yet to see Durant, Booker, and Beal play together. That was the 4th appearance of the season for Bradley Beal. He was back. He missed the previous 12 games, missed a full month. And I thought it looked pretty decent. Something that stuck out to me in all 4 games that he's played this season, like he's working his way to the line. Like the shooting has been a little up and down. Obviously, when you're missing so much time, it's tough to reintegrate. But got to the line 7 times, 5 of 12 from the field. Hit his first 3 of the night, 16 points, 3 assists, 3 rebounds in 27 minutes. What are you doing with Beal? In fantasy, if you're holding him anywhere, like is this somebody that you're really comfortable holding right now? It's like he's a tough player to trade, right? I mean, I don't think anybody's going to be buying until he at least stays healthy for a couple of weeks. And, the back injury, it's just something that can always be retweaked, right? I mean, we thought he was going to be back a month ago, played 3 games, and he misses another month. I'm not saying this is going to be a lost season. Like, I think it can only really go up from here health-wise for Beal, but you also got to take into account, I think you forget because he was just playing in the wasteland that is Washington these last couple of years. I mean, he's missed big chunks of time in each of the last couple seasons.
Absolutely. I don't think we're out of the woods yet when it comes to injury concerns with Bradley Beal or really any of these guys, given the fact that it is hard to believe. When you said that, I thought, is that right? They haven't played a single game together. That is crazy. We still haven't seen that. And I think part of the reason he's getting to the line is also part of the reason why I don't really love him in fantasy. This isn't a guy that feels like he needs to jack up a bunch of shots in order to help his team win. He can pick his spots. He can be much more patient and deliberate in his approach. That means that he'll be more comfortable just driving to the rack, take it to the rim, and maybe you draw a foul and just help his team stay afloat offensively rather than be the offense, because that's Devin Booker's job. And Bradley Beal shouldn't come in and try and take that. When you add Kevin Durant to the mix, I think you're going to get an even more passive Bradley Beal, and he's never been an elite defender, so it's not like you're getting those stats. Passing, I mean, that seems to be falling in the basket of Devin Booker as well. He's a guy right now, definitely don't want to drop him. He's got way too much talent for that. And you're right. What are you going to get for him in a trade? Unless you've got a Suns fan in your league, I think it might be hold on Bradley Beal.
Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with such a small sample size. And again, every game that he's played has been without either Booker or Durant. So it's tough to even use that small sample and feel like you can extrapolate. His assist numbers have been up the last couple of years in Washington. They were kind of lacking a true point guard in the post John Wall era. But I don't know if that's really going to carry over. Like you said, I think Booker is the point guard for this team. And we saw that last night. I mean, he's the guy that I think they feel more comfortable in that role. And obviously when Durant's back, he becomes the number 1 or number 2. And, I think we're going to see a lot of Bradley Beal, kind of functioning as the Kevin Love, Chris Bosh in this situation, if you will, which can still be really productive. I think he has a chance to really up his 3-point volume. Like that was something that quietly fell off the last couple of years in Washington. Like he had that season where he put up over 30 a game, back-to-back seasons, actually 2019 and 2020. And, those years he was hitting, 2.5, 3-pointers per game. But those last 2 years in Washington, you think of Bradley Beal as this high volume knockdown 3-point shooter. I mean, he only took 4.5 threes per game last season. And, I think that's the one area where maybe he could improve. And it's not ideal because you're kind of using him, you're maybe underutilizing his skill set. But, at the same time, Bradley Beal is way overqualified to be standing in the corner hitting open threes. So I think, if he could get to like 6 attempts per game, I think that's an area in category leagues where he could be a monster.
Yeah, for sure. And they're dealing with injuries right now too. Okogie left the game last night. You already seen Grayson. What was that?
We saw some bowl in the first half.
I mean, we're not getting enough bowl.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really have a nice 5-minute appearance from him with no made shots. RIP to the days of bowl, the fantasy relevant basketball option. But Grayson Allen, he'll be out tonight as well. So curious to see what they look like. Second night of a back-to-back going up against Durant's former squad. And Durant hasn't been ruled out as of the last time I checked.
Yeah.
By the time you listen to this recording, he will be. But we could possibly see the debut of the trio tonight.
Yeah, my guess is that you almost never see a player miss the front end of a back-to-back and then come back on the second end. So my guess is he does probably miss, but it's not a serious injury for KD. Like more likely, in excuse me, in my mind, that we see that big three together on Friday at home against the New York Knicks. But at some point, it's going to happen. Hopefully, at some point, all three will play together, and we'll finally get to see a fully formed version of this Suns team. Again, not a whole lot else to discuss from last night. We saw a little bit of a post in-season tournament hangover from the Lakers, who got off to a slow start against just an ultra depleted Dallas Mavericks team that is now, won 2 straight without Kyrie, without Josh Green. They're down Derek Jones, who's actually been giving them a lot of good minutes of late. I mean, it was just a kind of a classic, what you'd expect type of game from Luka Doncic, right? 43 minutes, gets you 33 points, 17 assists.
Crazy.
Only 4 turnovers, 3 of 10 from beyond the arc, 6 of 6 at the line. Grant Williams had a great game. I mean, Tim Hardaway coming back after missing on Monday night, 32 points off the bench for Hardaway. And Dante Exum out of nowhere.
I was going to say, we're not going to spend 5 minutes on Dante Exum. What are we doing?
We're spending at least 5 minutes on Dante Exum. 7 of 9 from 3 last night. I mean, the Lakers actually played pretty well. LeBron and AD, I think, had to exert themselves a little bit more than they expected last night. I mean, another just monster night from Anthony Davis, who was clearly hampered and still gave you 37 and 11 with 2 blocks, 33, 9 and 8 for LeBron. Like, the Lakers played well enough to win this game. They shot 54% from the field. They had 15 threes. Dallas went 21 of 43 from beyond the arc. And, the Exum thing is interesting. Like, if you're in like a daily lineup league where you can make moves throughout the week, like, I'd say pick him up. I mean, obviously once Kyrie is back, once Josh Green is back, we'll see what his role ends up being. But, I think he's played well enough now that in deeper leagues, you at least have to consider it.
I mean, it looks good. This is a guy that we thought we'd get a breakout from almost 10 years ago, and it didn't happen.
Right.
So he's definitely been putting the work in to get better. But my favorite stat of the line that Dante Exum gave us last night is that he made 7 threes. On the season going into last night, he had 8 made threes. So he almost matched his season total in one single game. Probably not. But my point is, doesn't sound all that sustainable, but it was cool to see. And like I wish I could remember which coach I heard say this. If I've seen you do it once before, I know you can do it again. And so, yeah, maybe he's got that in his bag now.
I mean, Exum is basically a career 30% shooter, and he hasn't played in the NBA since 2020, and that was, I don't even know if we count that. He played like 6 games for the Cavs that year. So I mean, it's obviously possible that he could improve, and he's been playing well overseas over the last couple of years. Maybe that's a little bit more tailored to where his game is at right now, but he's only 28. It's not inconceivable that he could still be making improvements, but that's going to be an interesting one to monitor. I mean, I think there are a lot of people out there who didn't even know Dante Exum was in the NBA this year.
Yeah. I think that would probably be accurate. But it goes to show the Dallas Mavericks are deep this year. They're not reliant on when Kyrie misses time. And by the way, weird look for Kyrie. He gave him the Deshaun Watson treatment. He was up in the suite last night. You got to stay down with the team. I know it's more comfortable upstairs.
Yeah.
Mark Cuban's sitting on the floor. He's the owner of the team. Like, what are you doing? Bad
Mark
look
Cuban,
for Kyrie, but yeah, they're not as reliant on the non-Luka stars as you would think.
Mark Cuban was wearing a Dallas Mavericks football jersey last night. It's like something that only Mark Cuban does. It looked like one of those old school like FUBU jerseys that people used to wear in elementary school. I'm sure those were popular in the Orlando area as they were in the general Green Bay area, like those FUBU like 07 jerseys. Where do you even get a Mavericks football jersey?
Walmart? I don't know.
Yeah.
Mark Cuban does not dress like a guy that is worth billions of dollars. And that's probably why he's worth billions.
Yeah.
I think I dress better than he does.
Yeah. Kyrie, by the way, the latest update that we got was yesterday. He's still in a walking boot and no return timeline. They in these situations, like at RotoWire, we're not supposed to, like rule a player out. Like technically, he's not ruled out for Thursday's game. I don't know if he's playing anytime soon, man. It's it's a weird injury, right? A bruised heel, which seems like a win based on how that injury looked. But I still think there's a chance that Kyrie, misses a pretty significant chunk of time. Obviously, a guy who has a pretty lengthy injury history, especially with lower body injuries. So I think there's going to be a lane here for Dante Exum to be a streaming candidate for the next couple of weeks. Obviously, Hardaway is probably going to benefit most. I mean, Jaden Hardy is in that conversation. I think in deeper leagues, like he looked great on Monday. Came back down to earth last night, just 1 of 7 from the field. I'm not all that interested in him, but if you're in like a 16 team league, I think he's somebody to consider at least for the next week or two.
Yeah, and you mentioned Grant Williams. Really liked what I saw there. He's always been an efficient 3-point shooter, and it was good to see him get back on track. So that's another guy that that I'm going to be looking to take some shots at as well.
All right, keep those questions coming in the chat. We will hit those in a little bit. I know it's early. I know it's Wednesday morning, but if you got any questions for the rest of the week, any trade questions, lineups, ads, drops, throw those in the chat, guys, and we will get to those in the second half of the podcast. We are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, and Underdog is the #1 platform for NBA best ball, as well as DFS player pick'em contests. If you haven't tried Underdog yet, new users get a first-time deposit bonus up to $100, and you also get a free 6-month subscription to our site, RotoWire, and all you got to do is use the promo code RWNBA. That's RWNBA. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com or download the Underdog app today. Use that promo code RWNBA and claim your free RotoWire subscription and that deposit bonus. And to be clear, I mean, that 6-month subscription, that gets you access to everything, not just our NBA tools, not just our DFS optimizer. But if you're in the playoff hunt in your fantasy football leagues, if you're starting to do some fantasy baseball prep, even looking ahead, to the next fantasy football season, that 6-month subscription unlocks everything at RotoWire. So go check that out. Again, the code is RWNBA. All right, Brandon, I wanted to kind of play some head-to-head, who would you rather roster the rest of the way? And I'll throw some names at you. You can toss them at me, and we will discuss. But I want to start with, we get a lot of questions during these streams about, what do you do with veteran guys who are injury-prone? Think Kawhi, Paul George, LeBron, Kevin Durant. In general, I'm kind of in favor of ride it out a little bit longer. We're still only 20, 25 games in. Later in the season, you maybe start to worry. But do you have, of that group I just named, LeBron, KD, George, Kawhi, is there somebody that you could possibly trust the most out of that group? Is there any inclination to trade for one of those guys? Because you might be able to get them at a discount if you have a manager who's worried about that injury, coming around the pipe.
I'm not that worried about LeBron James. I know that he's older, but he's been the healthiest over the course of his career by a pretty significant margin over everybody else. He doesn't have nagging injuries. I worry more about LeBron being held back, or really, if you want to word it properly, LeBron holding himself back so that he can be full go for the playoffs. But this guy really only knows one speed, and that's full throttle. We saw him go all in for the in-season tournament. The in-season tournament, this guy was playing like he was in the playoffs. LeBron's a competitor. I trust him much more than I trust anybody else. He's not as squirrely as a Kawhi Leonard, who will just miss time seemingly for no reason. And obviously he's getting older. All these guys have their concerns, but I trust LeBron the most.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the injuries that LeBron has suffered the last few years have been, I think, fluky, you could say, right? I mean, it's
like he has bad knees.
Yeah, you got people diving into him, things like that. I mean, who was it? Was it Solomon Hill, I think, who dove into him a couple years ago? I mean, like you said, they're not nagging injuries. They're slipping on the floor and straining your groin type of stuff. And you'd like to think that maybe that injury luck comes around for LeBron, whereas all those other guys have had more chronic issues. If you have the option to roster one of these two players the rest of the way, Julius Randle or Pascal Siakam, they are right next to each other in the season-long rankings right now.
I think I would go with Pascal Siakam. Julius Randle is so hot and cold, and you just never know when it's going to go away. I think Pascal Siakam is still so important to the everyday grind of what the Raptors want to do. It just feels like they're very similar players. To put those two head to head, in terms of the numbers that they're putting up, the abilities that they have, and their upside. But in terms of, I think for both, they both have incredible upside, and their best nights are all-star level. Mm-hmm. But the downside definitely points in the direction of Julius Randle. So I'll take the upside with the higher floor of Pascal Siakam.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're very comparable players in a lot of ways. Same position, like I said, they're basically provided equal value on the year so far. I mean, you do worry a little bit more about the field goal percentage with Randle, although Siakam has been just a disaster from three, and we'll see if that comes around at some point. Randle had that
he doesn't
terrible
take
start.
as many as Randle does.
No, he doesn't. And part of that is because he's just not making them. But, Randle got off to that horrible start, and I think that's still dragging down his numbers. The first 9 games of the year, Randle was shooting 33% from the field, 25% from three. Since then, so we're looking at a sample of 13 games, 52% from the field, 36% from three. So maybe he settles somewhere in the middle. But, if you isolate the last month, Julius Randle he's been the better player. I think he's a little bit more reliable counting stat wise. Like his down nights aren't as bad as Siakam's. Like Siakam every now and then will just have a disaster type of game, 4 of 12 from the field, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. Whereas at the very least, Randle's is giving you, the counting stats every night. And you're going to have to live with a hit to the field goal percentage and the free throw percentage. But I feel like he's a little bit more reliable in that regard. Oh boy, we got a frozen Brandon. Or he's taking his time to really think through this one. All right, we'll get Brandon back in the stream momentarily. Let's see. We'll take a couple listener questions when we get Brandon back. David asks, all right, thoughts on a Coby White breakout? I think the Coby White breakout may already have happened, may be in the process of happening. He's been a top 50 player over the last month, and I think it's entirely possible that Zach LaVine has perhaps played his final game in a Chicago Bulls uniform. I'm not saying he's not truly injured, but I also think there might be a little bit of gamesmanship going on with the Chicago Bulls front office and waiting for, players to become trade eligible later this week. And we'll see if anything becomes of that. But I think it's almost a lock that Zach LaVine is moved at some point. Might not be until the trade deadline in February, but it's going to depend more than anything on what the Bulls bring back in a potential LaVine trade. And we'll also see if they move DeRozan, maybe they try to move Vucevic as well. I think this pretty clearly is a sinking ship and a team that needs a reset, but Coby White's going to be a big part of that, right? I mean, this is a guy that has a draft pedigree, right? He's a top 10 pick in 2019. I think they have a reasonable investment in him, and, bringing in LaVine, bringing in DeRozan has kind of forced him to take a back seat these last couple of years. Last 11 games for Coby White, which is really when that breakout began, 23.3 points, 4.6 rebounds, 4.9 assists, 51% from the field, 53% from three on over 9 attempts per game. That's going to be the determining factor for Coby White. Obviously, he's not going to shoot, 51, 53, 91 the rest of the season. How much does that 3-point percentage come down? He's basically been acting as the co-focal point of this offense. So I don't know that a whole lot will change there. But at some point, he's probably going to regress closer to 40% from three, which is still totally fine. I mean, if you're above 40% the rest of the way, you feel pretty good. I would not be looking to offload Coby White by any means. I think if anything, you're going to have people trying to trade for him, and make sure you get a good return. Like I had an offer, Brandon, on Monday come through in the league where somebody tried to offer me Coby White for Jaren Jackson.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty strong. And Jaren Jackson coming off of his season best game, but just goes to show. We were talking about Coby White a couple of weeks ago on this show. Hopefully you all ran out and grabbed him. Zach LaVine doesn't look like he's ever going to play for the Chicago Bulls. This Bulls team is operating so much better, so much more fluid offensively, sharing the basketball better, playing that sort of Billy Donovan brand of ball. So what did you end up doing with that offer?
I declined it. I do think Jaren Jackson's best days are still ahead of him. And it was tough because, Coby White played a great game the other night. I mean, this was right after Coby White went for 33 and 6 with 6 threes, against Milwaukee. And, Jaren Jackson was coming off of that 42-point game. So it was kind of, my peaking player for your peaking player. But I still like Jaren Jackson more rest of the season. I want to see what this team looks like with Ja Morant and Marcus Smart back. I think they'll be more competent. I think in a roundabout way, it's actually going to help Jaren Jackson more than it hurts him. Like, obviously, Morant coming back means less offensive responsibility for Jackson. But these last 20-plus games have also proven that Jaren Jackson's he's just not a guy that could carry a team offensively. And I think he's going to be a lot more efficient. Like right now, it's not like you drafted Jaren Jackson thinking like, all right, you can lock in 25 points per game. It's like the thing that's really killing you is the field goal percentage. And he's taking more shots than he needs to. He's never been overly efficient as far as big men go, but he can't be shooting like 41% from the field. Like that's going to be a killer. So I want to see I want to see how he's, if he can kind of go back to being closer to a 50% guy from the field with Ja Morant, taking more attempts around the rim. The raw scoring numbers are going to decrease, but I think we see him hopefully move back into the player that he was last season. And it's hard to say how the return of Ja Morant affects Jaren Jackson, the shot blocker. But that's the other thing. Like, if you paid up for Jaren Jackson in a draft or in an auction, you're expecting at least 2.5 blocks per game. And, that's been the other thing that's really dragged down his value. He's had some of those splash games, but, he's not giving you a consistent 2, 3, 4 blocks every night.
Yeah, and Ja Morant coming back shouldn't do anything to help that. That seems like more of a Jaren Jackson issue. But offensively, it's the two-man game that's missing. They need each other. They feed off of each other, and his offensive production he's not a guy. I've seen way too much ISO Jaren Jackson Jr. That's not his game, and he definitely. We've learned that he needs he needs Ja Morant in the lineup. I think you made the right call. It would have been overreactionary to make that sort of a deal, but. Man, Coby White, what a find he has been. The fact that that's even a discussion, it's great. And I'm glad that I'm back. I have no idea what happened to my computer, by the way. Not a clue.
Hey, it's all good. You're back.
Shut down.
Yeah, sometimes that'll happen every now and then. Just couldn't handle the heat of the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Keep those questions coming in the chat. We'll get to those momentarily. Want to throw a few more, who would you rather have questions your way, Brandon? I've been looking to offload Damian Lillard in a league. And, part of it is I was just in like a rage situation after he went 2 of 16 the other night against Chicago. It's like, that's now 3 just horrible games. Like, his 3 worst games of the year, arguably, have come against the Bulls for whatever reason. I tried to trade him straight up for Donovan Mitchell. That trade request has not been answered yet in this league. I assume it'll be declined, but you also got to know your league. And I tried to trade him to a diehard Bucks fan who I thought would maybe value Lillard a little bit more highly. But what do you think of trying to trade Dame for, kind of do an elite guard swap? Like, I don't know if you can get Trae Young right now. Probably not. Maybe in a 9-cat league where you're a little bit more worried about the turnovers. But I'm trying to float offers for Donovan Mitchell, for Trae Young. You could even do a package deal for 2 lesser guards. But thoughts on Dame overall? Like, is this somebody that you feel is going to find his stride as the year goes along? Because he's been fine. Like, he's still been like easily a top 20 guy on the year. For the most part, everything's been good. Like, the free throws, especially, super efficient, high volume. But we're not seeing those like crazy peak nights from Dame anymore, right? It's like we haven't had one of those like Dame Lillard has 31 points in the second half type of games.
Yeah, and we're seeing him score into the 30s, but you don't need, and he doesn't need to be that guy anymore. They have Giannis. Giannis is putting up monster numbers because that's just what he does. So he's going to defer to Giannis and try and make sure that he remains the focal point in the offense. It's completely different than what he's ever dealt with in the past, even sharing the rock with CJ McCollum back in Portland. Right. I think that what he has been is what he's going to be. You just hope that he can be a little bit more consistent and avoid those pitfalls like you had against the Chicago Bulls where he went 3 of 17 from the field. I still like Damian Lillard a lot, and I think that he's a guy that over the years we've been able to rely on what he brings to the table scoring. He just doesn't have the same level of upside, but you also have to keep in mind these guys have not played a lot of basketball together. We're not to Christmas yet. I still think he most likely is just going to be what he is, but his best days with Milwaukee could still be in front of him. I would look at, like, would you rather have a Jalen Brunson, De'Aaron Fox? Like, I'd rather have those guys. Yeah. I don't know if somebody's willing to make that sort of a deal, but I'd rather have those sort of ball dominant guards.
Yeah, Dame versus Brunson is interesting. I think I would lean Dame there. Fox would be a really interesting one. That's an offer that I might have to float out there. What about Franz Wagner or Zion Williamson? They are also basically equal fantasy players in 8-cat leagues over the last month. And this one maybe comes down to if you're in a category league, where are you willing to take the hit versus get some of the increased production. But my guess is that you being in Orlando, you would lean Franz. But it's hard to say that there's not more upside with Zion, but you're worried about the weight, you're worried about the potential injury. But would you chase the upside there or go with who I think is the safer option in Wagner?
Obviously, I'm going to be a little slanted in my view because I watch this guy play every night. But Franz is one of the most consistent basketball players in the NBA. And I could say almost the exact opposite about Zion. You just never know what kind of player you're going to get. He doesn't look like he's in shape. I know that's been a big talking point on the debate shows, but it's legitimate. I mean, the guy looks, if you look at his side by side now compared to what he looked like in a Pelicans jersey a couple of years ago, the guy's put on serious weight, and it's not the good kind. Like, I think seeing him next to LeBron in the in-season tournament semi was eye-opening. This is not a guy that's fit, and I do worry about him staying on the court. Franz is an Iron Man type. If he misses time, it's going to be only because of a significant injury and nothing else. The field goal percentage, I know, was an issue a couple of weeks ago. It seems like he's rectified that, and he's been back to his old self in terms of what he's doing around the rim. And him and Paolo, they play a great game side by side. You never know. Like, one will shine one night, one will shine the other, but most of the time they usually split for about a total of 50 to 55 points between the two of them. I would go with the safer option, but of course it's not going to surprise anybody that's been listening.
All right, let's hit some of these questions in the chat. Again, keep those coming, guys. We appreciate it. Makes the podcast a lot of fun for us. Hopefully it gives you some actionable advice, and more than anything, helps us talk about as many players as possible each episode. Paul asks, I'm trying to trade away players from potential tanking teams. I have Kuzma and Markkanen. Who can I target with packaging those two, or even a 1-for-1 separately? This is a good question. We get this one a lot. I have a ton of Markkanen exposure. As far as elite guys go, he might be my most rostered this season, which is good and bad. When he's been out there, he's been fantastic. I mean, he's now missed 7 or 8 games in a row. I think the hope is that he's back at some point this week. He practiced late last week, practiced over the weekend, and then still was ruled out the other night. So we'll see. We're early on enough that I don't think you have to panic on Markkanen, but I don't know if I want him on my roster after the trade deadline. I think, those final 10 to 15 games of the year is when it could really hurt you, as it did with plenty of Jazz players last season. But even in season, even if we take the shutdown aspect away from it, the Jazz are one of those teams that feels like every other night they're getting blown out. They're down 30 going into the fourth quarter, and you're losing 5 or 6 minutes per game for Markkanen because the game is so out of hand. So I totally understand wanting to offload him. Who could you target then, Brandon? I mean, I think he's still good enough that you don't have to take like a massive discount on a return. But, I think the idea is that you're targeting somebody who obviously you feel better about health-wise, and then, from a team that's more competitive.
And so if I'm understanding this question correctly, you're trying to package these two players in order to upgrade.
Yeah, either package or do 1-for-1 trades. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a couple of names that would come to mind, like Paul George, just missed time with an injury, or was just knocked out. Yeah, got hurt last night. A guy like that, maybe there's a little bit of panic and injury concern, so maybe you could pick up someone like that. Domantas Sabonis, with two players of that caliber, you might even be able to swing a trade like that, maybe a little pie in the sky. Maybe you've got a fantasy manager out there that's down on someone like Desmond Bane right now, and with Ja Morant coming around the corner, they might be looking and saying, let me see if I can offload him. I don't think Desmond Bane is going to be hurt all that much by the presence of Ja Morant. I think the rising tide will lift all boats when it comes to the Grizzlies, like we were talking about with Jaren Jackson Jr. Those are a couple of the names that just pop into my head immediately.
Yeah, I think Markkanen is obviously the far more valuable of these two. And, it's tough to trade a player who's injured. But, again, maybe you wait for him to come back for a game or two, look good, and then, can do a little bit better in a return.
But that's where I think you have to target somebody where there's a little bit of concern on the other end. That's the only way you're going to do it. So with Bane, you've got the Morant factor looming. With Paul George, you've got an injury that's recent. We don't know the length of it. Maybe one of those Suns guys who – I mean, I don't know. You're not
getting Booker or KD. It's like, I mean, Beal. Yeah, I think that's taking on probably more risk than you're looking for. Some names that came to mind for me. Even you could try like Alperen Şengün. He's having a great year, but still ranks a little bit lower than you think in fantasy due to some of the deficiencies in his stat profile. Like a DeJounte Murray type. Even Bam Adebayo, kind of a my injured guy for your injured guy.
Right,
you're optimistic about him coming back. I think Desmond Bane's a good call. Even James Harden. I think there's still some kind of doubt as to how that situation is going to work out. But he's been a great fantasy player, man. Had a good game last night.
You just can't quit James Harden,
dude. I'm looking to acquire James Harden. Like wins and losses, team chemistry, that's not a category in fantasy basketball.
Right.
Like
trade requests.
Right. I mean, he had the hamstring issue a year or two ago, but other than that, he's been really healthy despite everybody questioning whether or not he's in shape. Like, he's the guy that I trust most of that big three in LA to stay healthy. So those are some names you could consider. Like, I think Sabonis, like you said, if you package those two, maybe you could get him. Who knows? That's a decent one. I was going to say Mikal Bridges. Probably not. He's like the ultimate safe option, right? I mean,
I would
for
go
one,
for
the Nets are competitive. Yeah. They're going to be in the mix for a playoff spot or a play-in spot. He plays 80 games every year. So that's somebody to consider. Obviously, you'd probably have to package those two in a deal. But, Kuzma is kind of a meme at this point, but he's still relatively productive, right? I mean, he's been the most consistent player by far, fantasy-wise, for the Wizards. So I don't think you're in a bad spot here. You should be able to bring back some pretty decent value. All right, what's Cat's value and Bridges want a package for a player? So look, I don't know which Bridges we're talking about. Could be Miles, could be McCall. But either way, you're packaging one of those guys with Karl Anthony Towns, especially if it's McCall Bridges. I mean, aim high here. I mean, this would be a pretty elite trade package.
Yeah, for sure. When we're talking about a top 30 player in fantasy, and I love the way the Wizards have been playing, and he's a really big part of that. So I don't see his production slipping off in any way. I don't know that I'm trying to unload Karl Anthony Towns.
I'm not either. I mean, over the last month, he's been a first round value in category leagues. So I wouldn't, again, if you're trading Cat plus Bridges, either Bridges right now, I mean, to me, you got to be getting back a top 10 guy, right? I mean, Cat in and of himself is almost a top 10 player, and then you're adding big time value on top of it. So, I mean, to me, we're talking like Halliburton, SGA, Jokic type of packages, guys that are almost impossible to trade for.
Yeah, go for it though. I mean, if that's what you're trying to make a move, but definitely value your guys properly, and make sure that you're getting a fair return. Shoot for the moon, and if you get a rejection, then hang on to those guys because assuming that it's Mikal Bridges and not Miles Bridges, that's quite the tandem to have on a fantasy roster. I
mean, even if it's Miles Bridges, I think there's a lot to like there too. I mean, you worry about the competitive aspect, I guess, with the Hornets, but that's still a player who I would be trying to acquire right now, especially not knowing when LaMelo's coming back. All right, Jason says, "Hey, question: should I trade Donovan Mitchell for Devin Booker in a 9-category league on Yahoo?" I don't know if you can really go wrong here. I think both these guys are really comparable. They've been very comparable throughout their careers, especially the last couple of years. If you're looking over the last month, Donovan Mitchell ranks just outside the top 20. Booker's about 6 spots higher. I don't really feel strongly about this because we're yet to see, the fully formed big three for Phoenix. And I do think, as we said earlier, like Bradley Beal's going to take the biggest hit when those three are healthy. I don't really think we see a huge drop off for Booker. But Donovan Mitchell is the guy in Cleveland, and that's not going to change either. I guess I would do it, but I don't feel strongly. I think you're in a good spot either way.
I think Devin Booker's assist numbers could potentially go through the roof. I think he's a guy that could average over double-digit assists when those guys all play together because he's going to be the primary ball handler. And he's the most – this might sound wild with Kevin Durant on your team, but he's the most consistent scorer among the three of them too. So I would rather have Devin Booker of the two. But like you said, that's not me. I'm a big Donovan Mitchell guy, and he's one of my most rostered players. So I love Mitchell, but I'd still rather have Devin Booker.
I think the other thing with Booker is he's the best health bet of those big three.
Right.
Phoenix, right. It's like, obviously Durant to me is still the best player, even at his age. But if you're talking about who are you most confident in, playing 90% of the games the rest of the way, I would say Booker. All right. Good question here from Dub Force. Ausar Thompson, is his playing time picking back up again? This is the $1 million question, man. We had 4 straight games where they brought Ausar Thompson off the bench. He averaged 16 minutes per game in that span. Didn't play well. He was 25% from the field. Didn't respond well. Wasn't still giving you rebounds. That was about the only thing. But only 2 assists, 1 total steal/block in that span. And then all of a sudden, 2 nights ago, they move him back into the starting lineup, and he plays 33 minutes. That was his most minutes in any game since November 14th. 20 points. 6 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, and a block. And was a kind of an ideal matchup fantasy-wise against the Indiana Pacers. Alex and I have kind of danced around this one. We've gotten a lot of Ausar questions over the last couple of weeks, and our answer has basically been try to hold him if you can. Like, I think he's a player that you would regret dropping. And if you did over the last couple of weeks, you might already be regretting it. But there's literally no way to predict what the Pistons are doing here. I mean, no team has changed up their rotation, changed up their starting lineup on a whim more than Detroit has already this season. Like, they are clearly scratching and clawing for any answer, trying to end this losing streak. And I think they had internally like real expectations for this season, right? Like there are other bad teams, Utah, Portland. I think they knew what they were getting themselves into this season. Whereas I'm not saying Detroit thought they'd be good, but I think they thought they would be significantly better than they've been so far. I don't think they thought they'd be the worst team in the league, right? So you have to factor that in to some degree. If somebody dropped Ausar Thompson, I would go grab him. I think it's a great sign that it looks like that stay on the bench was only going to be a week and a half, and Detroit has to accept their fate at this point, right? Like some sort of crazy turnaround is not coming here. So what is the point of keeping your top 5 pick on the bench playing 17 minutes a night?
Yeah, we don't see a lot of teams that go on a 20-game losing streak make a deep run into the playoffs. So
almost
I think
never.
Pretty sure that's never happened. I think the fate has been sealed for this team, but I wouldn't be too worried about Ausar Thompson. I'm with you. If he was on the waiver wire, he would zoom to the top of my list of guys I'm trying to add. His minutes are going to increase. Of course, they're trying to do different things. They've lost 20 games in a row. You have to think about that. Take yourself out of the fantasy mindset. Think like a coach. You would be switching lineups like crazy, trying to figure out how to get out of that situation. And Ausar Thompson looks like he's going to be a really good player in this league. He's already a fantasy asset when he gets the minutes, but he's a rookie. And when you're losing 20 straight games, you need experience out there to try and dig your way out of it. But that hasn't worked. And I think we're going to see him as somebody who is a buy low candidate. He's a surefire pickup if he's sitting there on the waiver wire, blocks, steals, he can score. He's smart with his shot selection. He's the kind of guy I want on my fantasy roster. His athleticism is through the roof. And he's one of the few players I feel really good about in Detroit right now.
Skeeter asked, do you see Josh Hart getting a bump with Mitchell Robinson out? Interesting question. Not a one-to-one positional replacement. Obviously, that's Hartenstein, who played 27 minutes on Monday, 11 points, 8 boards, 2 assists, 2 steals, and a block. Kind of best case. We'll see how many minutes he ends up playing. Obviously, we saw a stretch last season where you kind of thought Hartenstein would be in a good position with Robinson out, and Tibbs was still a little bit hesitant. But the Josh Hart angle of this is interesting because obviously he's such a great rebounder for his size, and Mitchell Robinson is just a rebounding vacuum. I wouldn't say there's a significant bump here. You have 3 very high usage players already in Barrett, Brunson, and Randle. So, Josh Hart like really upping his usage or doing more offensively without Robinson. I don't think that's really in the cards. But, I think they'll distribute those minutes a little bit more differently. They'll play smaller. You could use Randle at the 5. Maybe that means a little bit more for Josh Hart. I would say a marginal increase, but nothing super significant.
Yeah, I don't think it changes that much. We actually saw Jericho Sims get the starting nod with them switching up.
Very Tibbs.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of these coaches, they like to keep their rotations the same, and they try and not mix that up. I see it here in Orlando. It's the reason why Goga Batadze has become a fantasy name, because they didn't want to insert Mo Wagner into the starting lineup and disrupt they practice a certain way. They play a number of minutes together with certain guys on the floor at certain times. And especially these, I guess it's not just the old school coaches. We're starting to see some of the newer school guys like Mosley do that too. But yeah, I agree. I mean, Josh Hart, a fine fantasy player, but not anybody that's going to get this big tick up because of the injury to Mitchell Robinson.
All right, we got a couple either or questions from Mr. A. Number 1, Caleb Martin or Dante Exum?
Great question. I would go. I'm going to go with what I've seen more of, and that is production from Caleb Martin. And I think he'll get even more of an opportunity. Haywood Highsmith dealing with an injury right now. Don't know how long he's supposed to be out. And we saw it in the playoffs last year. I'm a big believer in Caleb Martin after watching all of those playoff minutes. Dante Exum has given us one single great game in years. So Exum has all the upside in the world if he's going to get the minutes, but Caleb Martin is definitely the play.
I feel the same way. I like Caleb Martin. The big concern, of course, is the return of Tyler Hero, right? I think if he wasn't coming back, then this is a home run Caleb Martin for me. We'll see. Once Hero's back, that's 27 to 30 minutes all of a sudden that, need to be inserted into that rotation. And I think obviously some of those are going to be lopped off of Caleb Martin, who has played 39, 34, 31, 35 minutes over the last 4 games. I still think he's, vastly more consistent. He's going to be the guy that, on average is going to give you much better fantasy production. If you look at a month-long sample, there'll certainly be weeks, I think, where Dante Exum or games where he could be more valuable. It kind of depends on what you think the Kyrie situation is too. Like if you think Kyrie is going to miss a month plus, then yeah, maybe there's something there with Exum, but I would rather have Caleb Martin. I think he's been so good that even with Hero back, they're going to find ways, for him to see at least 25, 27 minutes a night. So
I'm letting somebody else pick up Dante Exum. It was great. I loved what I saw last night. I was on the Mavericks +2, so I was smiling year to year. But no, I'm not buying it.
Keyonte George or Tim Hardaway? This is another really interesting one. To me, this comes down to what kind of league are you in and what categories are you worried about. If it's a category league, Keyonte George is shooting 35% from the field. That's the big concern. He does technically still rank ahead of Hardaway in category leagues, even despite that. But that's mostly because Hardaway is basically just points and threes.
Yeah, that's kind of what you're getting from Keyonte George too.
Yeah, you get the assists.
I'm going to go with Tim Hardaway, more consistent. And like you said with the Utah Jazz, like they've had so many games where they just bottom out.
They do, but like Keyonte George is the guy who still plays like 38 minutes because they're okay with the bottoming out. I think with him.
I like George, but I'd still rather have Tim Hardaway.
Okay. I think for the next couple of weeks, I'd rather have Hardaway. I think there's going to be some games like we saw last night with no Kyrie, where he's the clear number 2 option, and Luka's happy to feed him. But on balance, going forward, I might give slightly into Keyonte George, even though I haven't been the biggest fan of him. All right, prescient question for you, Brandon: is Cole Anthony a drop now?
No. He has not been as explosive offensively, but if you liked what you saw from him before, nothing circumstantially has changed, and he's still a candidate for 6th man of the year. I would expect there are going to be ebbs and flows to his season. By the time you drop him, you're going to be regretting it, wishing you had picked him back up. I would just hold. If you have Cole Anthony, there's no reason. Usually when I put a guy out on the waiver wire, it's something has happened. A circumstance has changed that's led me to believe I'm never going to get that production again. That's not the case. He's had a down week.
Well, what is the Fultz situation? I don't know if you have any more insight on this than anybody else, but that to me is the biggest factor here. If he's back and he's playing 27 to 30 minutes a night, I think at that point you could say, yeah, maybe Cole Anthony's a drop in 12-team leagues. I would hold him right now as well. On balance has been fantastic this year. And like you said, he's just been a little bit down of late. But do you have any idea if Fultz is coming back? I mean, this just is starting to feel like more of a chronic, they're taking it game to game, but it really feels more week to week.
And I think they kind of need him back. Obviously the Magic have been playing well. Their record is 16-7 right now. The battle for first place at the end of the week. They have the Celtics on Friday and Sunday. But Anthony Black is just not a starting level point guard. And if he was healthy, they'd be putting him back in the lineup. I can tell you that. I think Wendell Carter Jr., from what I've heard, is closer to a return than Fultz is. I haven't. The Fultz situation's been much more tight-lipped, which leads me to believe it's not coming in the immediate future. I do think he's going to come back at some point, but I don't think it's going to be within the next couple of weeks.
All right, we got back-to-back, very similar questions, eerily similar. One from Sean and one from Don. Just traded Coby and Porzingis for Karl Anthony Towns. Thoughts? And then we have another question that says Coby White for Porzingis. Both of these are 9-category leagues. So we'll talk about the 2-for-1 first. Coby White and Porzingis for Cat. Pretty fair deal to me.
Yeah. I'd rather have Karl Anthony Towns than the other two, but I mean,
it's fair for both sides. I would prefer Towns because of the injury risk with Porzingis. Like that's just, I know he's been really good when he's been out there. History suggests that that's going to be a losing investment more often than not. And obviously Cat's missed a lot of time too. So it's not like he's early in his career, he was like 82 games every year. But I think Cat's been good enough, and he has first round upside. Those other guys really don't. But I think this is a fair deal for both sides.
Yeah, I mean, there is a chance that what we're seeing with Coby White isn't going to sustain, but we still don't know what Chicago Bulls is really going to look like. But it's good to see Kristaps Porzingis back out there. We know that he's going to bomb it from three. He's had 6 attempts in each of his last 2 games. The rebounds should be there. I think they've been a little bit suppressed, but I would expect that to pick back up. I mean, these are all really good players, but you want the best player in the deal, Karl-Anthony Towns. So, well, you already did it. So, yeah, I agree. Good job.
Cade Cunningham for Poole and Jeremy Grant in a 14-team 9-cat league. Our question asker, Jay, would be looking to offload Cade Cunningham, worried about a potential shutdown from the Pistons. I get that. I mean, I don't think the shutdown would come until much later in the season, and
that would be ridiculous if they did that again. 2 years in a row to shut the guy down. I mean, at some point you got to play basketball,
right? Well, and last season obviously it was injury related. I don't know if they would shut him down. Like you said, I think you just kind of want to get reps for Cade Cunningham. It's not like Cade is winning them games, right? It's like at the end of the year, are you worried about draft positioning? Like you've lost 20 in a row with the guy playing every night, so I don't think that's really that big of a concern. Something Alex and I talked about on Monday too is this draft class. There's not a prize at the top. There's not a Wembanyama sweepstakes here where you're trying to make sure you're in that bottom 4 for the lottery odds. So something will develop. In a few months from now, there will be 2 or 3 guys that we're really excited about. It always happens, but I think with the way that this draft is shaping up, that's something you have to consider as well. I'd almost be more worried about a Jeremy Grant shutdown than a Cade Cunningham shutdown.
I completely agree. I'm not trying to move on Cade Cunningham. I know that the whole Pistons situation has been frustrating, but he still gives you 20 points most nights. He's good for double-digit assists a couple times over the course of a 2-week span. And the 3-point shooting isn't there. That's not really his game, but I still really like the player. And I think he's only going to get better. He's a really talented player. We have not seen the best of Cade Cunningham yet.
We'll address this one quickly. Kind of talked about it already. Is Coby White a sell high, or can he keep this up rest of the season? Do you expect Chicago to trade LaVine for a point guard? That's the thing. I expect them to trade LaVine. I think that is sewn up. I think that's happening. Could be as soon as like next week when guys become trade eligible. Could be January. Could be the trade deadline at the latest. LaVine wants out. When it gets to the point where he's publicly talking about, it's probably time for me to move on, and then is kind of mysteriously shut down with a who knows what's going on injury like a week later, the writing's on the wall. Like LaVine's gone, but the question is who's coming back, right? Like, do you bring in a young guard who you want to get a look at? I have no idea. There's no way to predict which team is going to step up or who you're going to get back. I don't think Coby White can keep up the efficiency rest of season. Like we said earlier in the pod, I mean, last month he's at like 50, 50, 90 shooting. That's not sustainable. The 3-point shooting, especially. So he's at peak value right now, but I think he could do like a reasonable facsimile of this going forward. Like unless they bring in, I don't even know who, like what, name young guard X who would come in and have to play 35 minutes. Like even in that situation, like you might be sending out more than Zach LaVine. You might be trading DeRozan as well. Like I think there's going to be minutes available. Like I think Coby White's going to be a big minute player the rest of the season. So can he keep up what he's doing right now? Exactly. No, but I would be looking to acquire rather than trade Coby White.
I tend to disagree. I do think that he's going to remain the starting point guard for the Chicago Bulls, and I fully expect them to move off of Zach LaVine. I don't know why they would bring in somebody else to take that spot from him when he's been one of your most productive players, and you've played well since putting Zach LaVine on the bench and just kind of waiting this trade situation out. So I think that will continue. What the problem is he is not sustainable on what he's doing in terms of the 3-point shooting percentage and all of that. So we're going to see dips. Right now what we're seeing is an average to good NBA player that's playing a really, really hot stretch of basketball sell high. When we're talking about some of the names that have already been discussed in the trades that have been thrown out there, like you talked about Jaren Jackson Jr., we had Karl-Anthony Towns as part of a Coby White trade of one of the answers or questions that we had a little bit earlier. When you're talking about selling high, these are exactly the kind of players that I think do it with. And if you can get max value for him right now, I think you strike while the iron's hot. You don't just sell him to sell him, but I think you can sell high on Coby White.
All right, we'll zoom through the rest of these questions. Really good one here from Admiral Nita. Has the stock of Jordan Poole, Ben Simmons, and Josh Giddey fallen so low that they're no longer buy low targets and are more stayaways? 12-team category league. I want nothing to do with Simmons. Didn't want anything to do with him in draft season. I think anybody who's watched Ben Simmons over the last couple of years kind of knew this was coming. I wouldn't be really looking to acquire him. I think even if and when he comes back, there's the next injury or the next tweak is right around the corner. But Poole and Giddey are interesting here.
Yeah, I tend to be a little more stay away with all of them. I've now been burned too hard on Jordan Poole this year. Not happy with the investment that I made there, and it seems like the Thunder are getting by just fine without Josh Giddey being one of their stars. You don't worry about a suspension anymore. It looks like that's not really going to happen, so not going to factor that into the equation. But these are three players that just simply are not blowing me away.
Yeah, I mean, Giddey, I don't mind grabbing just because, he's still giving you last 10 games have been really underwhelming, and he's still, 10, 6, 4, and a steal. It's like it's still usable. Doesn't take enough shots where the field goal percentage is like a huge negative. I mean, it's certainly not a plus. But, he's shooting it terribly from three. Doesn't take that many. I think there's maybe some buy low with him. Poole looked like he was moving in the right direction for a while, relatively speaking, and then has been just terrible the last 2 games. So I think any hope of a Jordan Poole breakout at some point, I think it would have happened, right? I mean, we thought this guy would hit the ground running and just be piling up points. And, there's that report a month into the season that the Wizards don't view him as part of the future. It's a lost season for Washington. And the worst part with Poole is they're not giving him the minutes. That's a bad indication, right? It's one thing if you're playing poorly, but you're still out there for 35 minutes, racking up counting stats, but they're getting blown out every night. He's only playing 26, 28 minutes for a lot of those. So I would probably stay away from all three. But if you're looking to acquire one, Giddey would be the guy for me. What's up with Devin Vassell? Should I be looking to unload him or hold? We are, of course, talking about Devin Vassell for the San Antonio Spurs. Yeah, it's been a little bit shaky. The raw numbers look pretty similar to last season. Obviously he missed basically the entire second half. But he's at 47% from the field on the year, 37% from three, again, close to where he was last season. So I think he's been about as expected. Maybe hasn't taken a big step forward, but I think kind of neutral on him. I'm not panicking on Vassell. I think you're getting about what you should have expected.
Yeah, I mean, the Spurs are in a similar situation to what we're seeing with the Detroit Pistons. They just lose a lot of basketball games, and when you lose a lot, usually your best players aren't holding up their end of the bargain. Devin Vassell still the second leading scorer on the team. It just kind of is what he is. I don't think could you look to unload him. I don't know who's trying to buy Devin Vassell right now, so I would just hold.
Kawhi Leonard and Jrue Holiday for Kristaps Porzingis and DeJounte Murray. This is a 9-category league. He's punting field goal percentage and punting rebounds. Which side of this trade do you like more?
I think I would lean the Staps and DeJounte Murray side. You're just getting a little bit more bang for your buck there.
Yeah, Jrue Holiday's just not been a great fantasy player this year. His numbers have taken a predictable hit in Boston. Still great real life player, of course. You worry about the injuries with Porzingis and Kawhi almost cancel each other out for me injury wise. Kawhi's still the best player in the deal, but DeJounte Murray's also been extremely healthy, and I think is always one of the more underrated guys in fantasy. So I don't love either side of this because of the injury risk, but obviously you're either hanging on to an injury risk in Kawhi or acquiring one in Porzingis. But I think Murray to me outpaces Holiday enough that I would rather have the Porzingis Murray side. What can I get for Poole and Hayward? Tough to say. Gordon Hayward, I'm riding it out with him in a couple of leagues, just waiting for that injury to come. He's been solid though. I mean, he's picked up his assists a little bit with no LaMelo. Minutes have been there. He's always been fine when he's been healthy. It's just that injury is coming at some point, and we just talked about Poole. Not a guy that a lot of people are trying to acquire right now. So packaging those two together, I don't think you're going to get anybody that's going to blow you away, right? You got to go pretty low here. Is there anybody that comes to mind?
Could you get one of the Pelicans guys like a Herb Jones or a Trey Murphy, or is that even
Yeah.
asking too much?
I think that's fine. I think that's a
I would
good
do that.
range to aim for. Could you try to get, I don't know, Spencer Dinwiddie, D'Angelo Russell, guys who are kind of have high variance, somebody who might be frustrated with some of their down games.
D'Angelo
That's
Russell, by the way, I was looking at that MVP list that we went over a couple weeks ago. He's still towards the top of it as far as the most successful teams in fantasy basketball. A high percentage of them have D'Angelo Russell on their roster.
I don't understand that. I guess
don't either.
I think that does adopt to like Yahoo's default settings. Maybe they have some sort of D'Angelo Russell boost in there. He is shooting 50% from the field, so whatever. We'll give him that. I have no idea how that that makes sense. Like when you watch him, I feel like every night I tune into the Lakers, he's not having a good game. So I guess when I'm not watching, he must be going off. All right, James says I have Vucevic, Valanciunas, Triple J, Hartenstein, and Nick Richards trying to trade one center away for a good power forward in return. Who should I aim for? And again, who? Thanks. All right. Thanks for the question, James. Yeah, you got a little bit of a glut at center here. It's not depending on your league settings, it's not a bad thing to have options at center. You never want to be in that boat where you don't have enough centers and you're forced to start maybe two of them, but you got enough here. I'd be looking to trade. Obviously, you can make a case for any of those guys, but if you're looking to get a good power forward in return, you might have to trade one of those first three, Vucevic, Valanciunas, or Jared Jackson. If you're putting Hartenstein or Richards out there, I don't think you're going to get a quote-unquote good power forward back. I don't know. I mean, do you maybe try to aim for somebody like Jabari Smith, who's quietly played pretty well?
Yeah, it was one of the first names that jumped out at me when I was looking at the list. I think PJ Washington has been his production has been suppressed with LaMelo Ball out of the lineup, but if we see LaMelo come back, he seems to thrive off of the way that LaMelo runs that offense, and his defense is going to keep him on the floor. So he's a guy that you might be able to look at. I don't know if Evan Mobley is getting a little bit too aggressive in what you could potentially get back, but yeah, those would be a couple of the names. I like the Jabari Smith poll because it just, as somebody who has Jabari Smith, he's one of those players on your roster you're always willing to unload because he's not changing the game for you, but he's good enough to be in your starting lineup.
Yeah, I mean, you could try to pull like a Triple J for Siakam, that type of thing. I think those are two players that a lot of people are probably looking to move off of right now. So you got options. You got plenty of options. All right, Yusuf says, hey, guys, I got offered Embiid for my Booker and McCall Bridges. Do I need to get another player to equalize the trade? Is it worth to get 75th to 85th player with Embiid? What is the target rank for second player? Okay, so basically Booker and McCall for Embiid, is that a fair deal? I actually think that's relatively fair. I mean, if you can get a third or a second player, to come with Embiid, I think you at least try that first. Don't accept the offer without countering, and if they decline, I think this is a relatively fair deal. Like, I'd still rather have the Embiid side because he's been such a monster. Some of these top guys like SGA, Embiid, Halliburton, Jokic. I mean, they like outpace even other first round values by so much that they're just incredibly valuable. But Booker and McCall Bridges is to me a pretty fair offer.
Yeah, and so this person has Booker and McCall Bridges, so I would I would slam accept. I wouldn't get cute. Sometimes when you start to throw offers, counter offers back and forth too much, you end up losing the deal. I think I would do it straight up because the player you're going to add to that mix where the other person's still going to say yes, I don't think that individual player is going to change the game for you.
All right, we'll do this one quick. You think the Warriors make some changes soon? Maybe Kuminga over Wiggins, less Clay. This team is looking sad. Yeah, we talked about this at the top, man. It's not looking good. I feel bad for Curry, which I have not said very often as somebody who tends to be more of a LeBron supporter. But it's tough, man. I mean, they left it all out there last night. Still came up short. It was the bench that was carrying them. I think Wiggins to me is the guy who gets replaced first. I mean, he's just been a total train wreck. And even if they don't pull him from the starting lineup, like we've already seen, more Moody, more Kuminga. I think some of Podziemski's minutes have come at the expense of Wiggins. Clay is so tough. Like I think they have, and rightfully so, this kind of undying loyalty to Klay Thompson. And I think we know if anybody's capable of heating up for a month, it is still Clay. Like it's hard for me to see because I actually thought he was really underrated last year. Like people were talking about his downfall last season. I'm like, his numbers to me look pretty good. I know he slipped on defense, but I thought he for the most part, played really well last season. And it's hard for me to see why there would be this big cliff coming other than, I guess, just age and these injuries adding up. So I think they will punt on Wiggins much faster than they do Clay.
The legs seem to be going with Klay Thompson, and he came back after many months of rehab from that ACL injury, and it just seems like age has caught up with him. What can they do? The only player they have on their team with significant trade value, they're never going to trade, and his name is Steph Curry. I just don't know what they can really do outside of making some of those minor moves. Starting Kuminga over Wiggins. They might end up doing that. They continue to slip. Yeah. Steph Curry wasn't all that good last night either, 26% from three-point range. So I'm not going to say he's part of the whole problem, but he was part of the problem last night.
So on top of this, Zach asks, basically, is it worth adding Podziemski right now? Or are we jumping the gun after another, kind of splash game for him? And, we got a lot of similar questions about a month ago when he had that big game. I forget who was that against, Minnesota. I think that was the Draymond ejection game. That's right. So that was like almost exactly a month ago against the Timberwolves. Podziemski's last 5, he's averaging 28 minutes a game, 12 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. The field goal percentage for a guy who's that small and takes a lot of tough shots has been pretty good. If you're in a deeper league, I would say, yeah. I mean, if you're 14, 16 teams, absolutely. I think Golden State, you kind of heard it in Steve Kerr's voice last night. Like, they're searching for answers, and I don't think Curry's obviously safe. I don't think Clay's going to see a massive reduction in minutes, but they're going to do whatever it takes to try to win games here. And I think Podziemski he's been better, like, on balance than Clay has for a lot of the year. So yes, I would go out and add him if you have a roster spot. Don't expect too much, but definitely worth an add for me.
I mean, it's a speculative ad just to see what the Golden State Warriors do in order to correct this situation. They got to do something because this team has too much pride to be sitting at 10-13 right now. So Steve Kerr is going to start to shake things up.
All right. Supremacy asked, how do you check that MVP fantasy team stat? We will send that in the chat right now.
Here, I believe I have that. I believe I have that saved. Let me move this.
Yeah, I just sent it.
Okay.
But you can.
Well, that was fast.
Yeah. All you got to do is just Google Yahoo Fantasy Basketball MVPs, and it'll take you there. But yeah, interesting page that shows you the highest rostered players on the most successful teams this season. James says, should I try to get Middleton? If so, who would be a good trade for him? I mean, he's probably pretty undervalued. I think especially if there's somebody who's not, checking box scores and just, you hear the narrative of, he's not playing that many minutes. He's still working his way back. Like, he's still going to be like a borderline top 100 guy. So yeah, I actually don't mind adding Middleton. I think there's only upside the rest of the way, unless that knee injury, really starts to crop back up. Even in limited minutes, he's still giving you 13, 4-4, which is fine, especially in a deeper league, but don't give up anything too crazy for Middleton. I wouldn't be giving up somebody who's played better than him quite yet. But if you have somebody in your league who's worried about Middleton long-term, I don't mind adding him if you can get him cheap.
Yeah. I mean, if there's somebody that's been hot off the waiver wire, you can package someone like that and a low-end starter, something like that, and work your way into getting Middleton. I agree with Nick. I don't think you need to give up much in order to acquire him. He's not somebody that teams are holding on to with dear life.
Mm-hmm. Do you expect Trey Murphy to get back to the same production he had last season? Good question. I love Trey Murphy, one of my favorite individual guys in the league. My answer is no, because Zion barely played last season, and that was a huge part of the reason that Trey Murphy had his little second-year breakout. I think he can get close. Zion could obviously get hurt again. That would certainly help him. But yeah, you just got to remember that, most of his, breakout last season came without Zion. And as long as he's in the lineup, I think they just got too many guys. They got to play Herb Jones. Obviously Ingram, McCollum, these guys all need big minutes. So as long as Zion's healthy, my answer is no.
Yeah, love the player, but a lot of that production came due to Zion not playing basketball. And if he's out there, he's going to get his minutes. So yeah, same production, no, but he's still a player that I want.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Westbrook, is he a drop candidate or should you ride it out? I would drop him. Wait and see on Paul George, I guess. I know the Clippers downplayed it after the game last night. They said it was precautionary holding him out in the second half. So I wouldn't have too much concern there, but I I'm not a Westbrook guy. I'd be. I mean, he's playing like 17 minutes a game over the last couple of weeks. I'd be pretty comfortable dropping him. Trying to unload Jalen Green and Brogdon for a point guard or a shooting guard, 14-team category league. Anybody come in mind? This is tough because Jalen Green is kind of doing similar things to last season. Obviously, with Brogdon, he's been banged up. You worry about a trade. It just doesn't really match the rest of that roster in Portland. So, yeah, I mean, tough to hand out a specific player, I suppose. But if you're looking, let's see. I don't know. I mean, could you try? I mean, could you try to get like Zach LaVine, buy low on him while he's out?
I think you absolutely could. Who's trying to hold Zach LaVine right now? I think if that person that has him on their roster, especially if you got to look at their record and see if are they struggling to find production? Do they need wins and take advantage of situations like that? Mm-hmm. I think that's a really interesting player that comes to mind there.
All right, we'll do a couple more, and then we got to get out of here. We're well over the hour mark. Let's see. Rodrigo says, do you guys prefer Jaylen Brown or Darius Garland rest of season?
I would go with Darius Garland.
Me too.
Man, I mean, I saw him personally the other night at the Amway Center, and he just went off. The second you start to focus in on Donovan Mitchell, which most defenses are going to try and take him out of the equation as much as they can, as hard as that may be, it just really opens things up for Garland. He's become a better three-point shooter, and he's a great facilitator. He leads the team in assists as well.
Yeah, I'm on Team Garland here, no question. In category leagues, Jaylen Brown's free throw percentage really hurts you. He's never been a good free throw shooter. He's gotten worse this season compared to the last couple. I mean, he's hanging around close to 70%. The assists are down. The rebounds are down quite a bit. I think the addition of Porzingis, that's robbed him of 2 rebounds per game. To me, it feels like Garland hasn't even played that well, and he's still been a better fantasy player to date than Garland has. And I think Garland has more upside the rest of the way. So that's where I would lean. All right, a couple more. Hartenstein and Caleb Martin for Chris Middleton. I don't know if I would do that. I don't think
so. I think I'd rather have Hartenstein and Caleb Martin.
Yeah, me too. At least for the next month. The thing with Middleton, like I think I'm relatively high on him. I still don't think he ever plays like 36 minutes a night by the end of the season.
Yeah, they're saving him for the playoffs.
Yeah, the Bucks. I don't think the Bucks care about the 1 seed that much. Like this entire, obviously, it's title or bust for Milwaukee, and I don't think they care about our fantasy teams either. So, no, I mean, Caleb Martin's production is probably going to be pretty similar to Middleton, honestly, for a while here. So I would much rather have the first side of that. LeBron for Booker. I get LeBron. Is that fair? Rest of season.
It's fair.
That's fair.
I think I'd rather have Booker, but it's close.
It's so tough. I mean, LeBron's a better player. It's just, do you think LeBron's getting hurt? That's what it comes down to for me. Definitely fair, though. You're incurring some risk with LeBron. I'll just say that. If you're doing well in your league and you're in like the top 3 right now, I probably wouldn't rock the boat. But if you're looking to make a move up, then yeah, sure, go ahead, grab LeBron. Let's see. We'll do one more here. Obi Toppin. End on a high note. Is he still a 14-team 9-category hold? Considering Mathurin and Nesmith have played well recently. Yeah, in 14-team league, probably not. I don't know. I mean, with Toppin, he's a better like real life player, I think, when he's running hot than he is a fantasy player. On the year, it's like he basically gives you 12 to 14 points. Really doesn't rebound for how athletic and large he is. Only 3 rebounds a game on the season. Marginal 3-point shooting. He does shoot a very high percentage. That's the thing. He's over 60% on the year. So he is helping you quite a bit in field goal percentage, but I don't think you would necessarily rue the day that you dropped Obi Toppin in a 14-team league.
It's a good way to put it. Yeah, he's a putback specialist, so he's going to shoot that high percentage, but just doesn't give you a lot else. And I think I've been waiting for the Ben Mathurin ascent. I think we're finally starting to see it, and perhaps that does hold back Toppin's overall value.
All right, last one coming in under the gun here. George says, "Hi guys, appreciate what you do." Thank you, George. Would you hold and enjoy Anthony Simons, or should I sell high? I would hold him for now. I mean, I think he's going to be a complete monster. Later in the season, we'll see. He could be a shutdown guy for sure. But he's also young enough and part of their core that, like, I think Jeremy Grant is who I would worry about most in Portland being shut down. I would hold Simons. I mean, I guess like if you could flip him for like a bona fide top 25 guy, yeah, then I would think about it. If you really want to, but I mean, I think he's going to be a complete monster. Like this is an ultimate. This is what we thought Jordan Poole would be, right? I mean, this is like he's like a good version of Jordan Poole.
For sure. I'd be more worried about a trade than I would be a shutdown. I think Anthony Simons, with all the glut of guards they have, Simons, definitely Brogdon, those guys might end up on the move, but that doesn't necessarily tank his fantasy value. He could end up in a good spot.
I think he's going to keep doing what he's doing. Like he's been awesome these first 3 games. Hits the ground running. He's averaging like 33 a game. He's hitting a ton of threes. Very good free throw shooter as well. That's something that's not talked about with him. I mean, he's like an almost 90% guy. So I would hold him. I still think you could trade him in a month if you have the same concerns, and his value is going to be about the same. All right, that'll wrap it up, guys. Went for 80 minutes here, man. Good questions in the chat as always. Really appreciate that. Helps us, help you guys talk about as many players as we can. You can always catch the archive version audio on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. You can check us out on YouTube if you missed it live. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. That helps us immensely. You can leave us comments there. We'll answer those. And give us a follow on Twitter as well. That helps us out. So thanks for listening along. We appreciate it. We'll have an episode coming at you guys tomorrow morning. And then we'll have Alex, Ken, and Shannon talking waiver wire on Friday.